This is the Little Moments Count radio podcast, created in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. Each episode, you'll hear interviews with early childhood experts on how to support the important brain development that takes place in the first 1,000 days of life, just through little moments every day. Learn more at littlemomentscount.org/podcast. You are listening to WFNU LP 94.1 FM. This is Frogtown Community Radio. And welcome to So St. Paul, a show that's all about, you guessed it, our great, fantastic capital city, St. Paul, Minnesota, and the people in it, and the events and the things surrounding St. Paul that make it so wonderful. I'm your host, Katie DeSalle, and I am here every Thursday evening from 5 to 5:30 p.m., giving you all kinds of info and tidbits about St. Paul and the fantastic people that make it so great. And this episode of So St. Paul is presented in partnership with Little Moments Count and Minnesota Public Radio. Little Moments Count is a statewide collaborative that is focused on helping parents and caregivers learn about the importance of brain development in the first 3 years of life. Nearly 80% of brain growth happens in the first 1,000 days, and small moments of interaction like talking, playing, reading, and singing help create the pathways that build a child's brain during this early stage of life. For more information, you can visit littlemomentscount.org. So St. Paul is excited to be partnering with Little Moments Count to host conversations focused on early childhood development. I will be joined once a month with a new guest to talk about their involvement in Little Moments Count and how they view the role of early childhood development in creating bright futures and strong communities. And I'm very excited today because I am talking with Dr. Andrea Singh, who's a pediatrician, a mom. She's the chair of pediatrics at Park Nicollet, and she co-leads Children's Health Initiative work at Health Partners. She teaches her patients how to be advocates for their own well-being as they enter young adulthood. And she has a special interest in helping families navigate parenthood for the first time. So thank you for joining us, Dr. Singh, and welcome to So St. Paul. Can you explain the first 3 years of life and why they're considered a critical period for brain development in children?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first 3 years of life, or sometimes we refer to it as the first 1,000 days of life, is a critical period for growth in general for kids. When they're first born, there is so much happening in those little baby bodies and minds. And over the first 3 years in particular, brain growth grows exponentially. So there are over 1 million neural connections every second being developed in that first 3 years of life. When a baby is born, their brain is about 25% the size of what their brain will be when they're adults. But by the time they're 3, it's already at 80% of the adult size. And by the time they're 5, it's about 90%. So those first 3 years are just critical for brain growth and development. And the more we can nurture our kids and basically feed them with all the good stuff, whether it is brain stimulation and talking and singing and reading, or just good healthy food and attention and good sleep, the better it's going to be for that child's development.
Wow, I didn't realize that amount of brain growth, 80% happens in the first 3 years of life.
Yeah.
I think if more parents and caregivers knew that, there would be a lot more focus on those 3 years.
Absolutely. It is just such a critical period. And it makes sense instinctually if you sit back and think about what a newborn baby can do compared to what a 3-year-old can do. It's astounding the gains that they have in that period of time. But when you're in it and you're a parent and you're tired and there's a lot of demands on you, it's not as obvious. And so it is really important for those of us that really care about kids to remind people that this first 3 years is so critical. And we really can make an impact by doing very little things that are part of our normal lives.
Great. Yeah, that leads me right to my next question. What are some things that parents and caregivers can do to really help and support their child's brain growth during these early years?
Yeah, great question. Number one thing is love and attention. Kids do the best when they are attended to, when they are nurtured, when there is what we call the serve and volley of interactions, where if a child acknowledges, makes a face at you, you make a face back, and then child makes a face back in response to your face, and you're going back and forth. And so there's that interplay. And there's been a lot of research done in the field of child psychology that show that serve and volley really helps kids understand what normal interactions are, how to problem solve, how to process emotions, and enhance brain growth. Easy things that we can do, like just playing peekaboo, talking to your child, singing to your child, reading to your child, just including them in your day-to-day activities can make a world of difference when it comes to how their brain develops.
That's great information. And so are there like key milestones that parents should be aware of during the first 3 years to make sure that their children are growing at a healthy rate?
There are. And I think that's where it really underscores the importance of having a regular clinician that your child goes to and sees. I'm a pediatrician. I'm going to advocate for bringing your child in for well visits so that you can make sure that your child is meeting all of those milestones. Some things are real objective, like growth parameters and looking at a growth chart and making sure your child is gaining appropriately for who they are and what their body type is. There are other milestones that lots of people are familiar with, walking and talking somewhere in the range around a year of age, but many things that you can talk with your child's healthcare provider about when you go in for checkups.
Great. So as a pediatrician, what are some, like you mentioned, like children walk at different stages, but what are some other signs of healthy development that you look for as a pediatrician in ages 0 to 3 during your visits?
Yeah. A lot of it depends on how old the child is. So even in that range of 0 to 3, if I'm thinking of a very young infant, I am looking to see how do they interact with their parents? Do they look at their parents for reassurance? Are they starting to smile? Are they starting to make eye contact and follow things? As a child gets older, you are looking for things like fine motor coordination. Are they able to pick up Cheerios or something off of their high chair when they're trying to eat? Are they wanting to play with another person and interacting that way? The walking and talking, I think, are real obvious milestones, but there is a range in which that's normal. And by the time you get to the age of 2.5, 3, we're looking for even more sophisticated things like, is your child trying to problem solve? Are they trying to do things for themselves? Whether it's grabbing silverware and trying to eat or struggling, they might not be successful, but struggling to get their shirt on or trying to put a sock on their own foot.
Great. You mentioned the language aspect of it. I remember when my daughter was very little, like it was just pushed onto me that I need to read to her as much as possible. And I didn't really understand as a new parent, like, why am I reading to this kid who doesn't understand, who doesn't she can't read. It's just me tired going through the pages. Can you explain a little bit about why it's so important, not just reading, but communicating verbally with your child and how that affects their growth?
Absolutely. And I think you nailed it on the head there, Katie, when you said it's not just about reading. It's really about that communication and what I said earlier about the serve and volley and interacting with your child. So the truth is that not everybody loves reading or is able to read. And not every parent will be equipped with those skills. But most parents have the ability to talk with their child, sing with their child, interact with their child in some way. And even those parents that actually don't have verbal abilities can communicate through sign language or other things. And so it's really important because when a child sees another person in their environment doing that serve and volley and talking with them and interacting with them, those neural connections start to get developed and they take cues from that stuff. So, like, even when we're talking now, our speech is going up and down in terms of tone, and there's a back and forth, a rhythm to how we interact with each other. Kids are observing all of that. And when you're reading a storybook, that's easy if you have the ability to read because it does have that rhythm to it, and the sounds and the rhyming seem to make sense. But kids can also start to draw connections. If you say, look at the doggy, and then you point at a picture of a dog, they're going to start to associate the word doggy with something that looks like that picture. And so that's the beauty of using books, but you can use songs and include emotions with that. Verbal storytelling, lots of cultures have stories that have been passed down generation to generation, and kids are never too young to hear those things because, again, even if they're not understanding the moral of the story, they're hearing the speech prosody, how your voice sounds. They're watching your face to see how it matches with the words that you're saying and the emotions that are tied up there.
Yeah, and even as you're talking right now, I'm nodding my head in agreement, and it's these like nonverbal ways of that we communicate as well that I assume like the child emulates after watching people communicate with each other.
Absolutely. I tell parents all the time, it's not magical. Parenting a young child is exhausting. And so it's really hard to say, oh, like I've got one more thing on my checklist that I have to do. If you think about, oh my gosh, I've got to read these books to my child. But if you incorporate the interactions throughout your day, and you may get something fun and enjoyable, maybe part of your routine, or just talking with your child when you're doing routine things, you're meeting those goals of interacting with your kiddo and helping that brain development. I always use the example of it's a 2 a.m. diaper change and you're exhausted and the lights are low and all you want to do is get back to bed. And you can talk through that diaper change with your baby. Oh, Katie, this is so gross. This was a stinky one. Mom's really tired. She needs to get to bed soon. Hopefully we can go to bed and have a good night's rest. It's not something that takes a medical degree. It's just really those basic interactions.
Yeah, that's great. Because I think learning how important the first 3 years of life is, I think it can be overwhelming, especially for parents who are already exhausted and overwhelmed and don't exactly know what they're doing. But putting it like that, where it's these easy things that you're already doing, just like speaking it, speaking what you're doing, or like making faces. It's just regular things that we do every single day.
And the fun part about that is that not only you're not doing it specifically because you're trying to enhance your child's brain development, you're doing it because you love your baby. And those interactions, there's nothing more precious than some of those first smiles or first laughs that you can get. When even a tired parent can enjoy those moments, even we don't have to make it a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So as a pediatrician, Dr. Singh, what are some of the common concerns or questions that parents have when they come in for their child's early health visits?
Yeah, I think some of that depends on how experienced the parent is and where they are in their parenting journey. For brand new parents, a lot of times people just want to know that they're doing things right. And I'm making air quotes here because there is no exact right way to parent. But I think a lot of times parents want validation. They want some understanding about what's next, what's coming next, what should I expect? How will I know if my child is following normal development? And that changes based on the stage in which the child is at. So it's really fun and it's a neat journey, but I think really parents just want to understand what to do and how to do it in the best way to set their child up for success. It's weird because parenting is like when you are a brand new parent, it's like taking on a job that you really have no experience in and applied for this job, you've gotten this job, and there's really no great orientation or anything. You're just thrown in there, and you have to keep this child alive and you have to help this child thrive. So some of it is instinct, but some of it is leaning on those experts in your world, whether it is family members, community members, healthcare clinicians, friends, books, whatever it is, to help guide you on that path so that you can be a successful parent.
And that made me think of support systems. I know, especially in Minnesota, there are a lot of people who are born and raised here and stay here, and they have their community of people already, which is great. But if you're new to Minnesota, I know it can be sometimes hard to make those connections. If there's a parent, I don't know if you've had experience with this, that comes into a healthy child visit and really doesn't have a lot of those supports, do you have any resources or anything that you suggest to them to meet other parents or just to build that community around them?
I do. I am a huge proponent of ECFE in Minnesota, and we have such a robust early childhood family education framework in the state. And our ECFE programs are really driven out of school districts. And I always refer parents, especially those that are looking for community, to contact their school district and their community education department to learn about ECFE classes, which sometimes come with a cost, sometimes are free, sometimes can have a sliding scale, but those can be wonderful places to find parents that are in the same stage in the journey that you're at.
That's really helpful. I know I was involved in some ECFE classes with my daughter, and it was just very fantastic to be around other moms who had the same, like I said, same kind of development with their child, and to like bounce ideas off each other. Or, she won't sleep during this time. How do you get your kid to sleep? She doesn't like this food. What are you feeding her? So it was really, I learned a lot from these other moms, more so than I'd say from even like the parenting books that I had.
Yeah, no, for sure, because that's real life, right? Even social media doesn't always, while some people will look to social media for connection and some of that collegiality, there's also a bit of a hidden piece to things because you don't really see how tired that person is when they're typing on their social media platform. But when you're in an ECFE class side to side with another parent that has a child your age, you can see how tired they are, or you can actually, it's just an environment where I feel like people are comfortable potentially being more honest about the realities of how hard parenting is, but how great it is too.
Yeah, exactly. Because as you said, like nobody puts out their worst selves on social media at 3 a.m. with no sleep. And it's nice to commiserate with someone who's going through some of the same hardships you are, to know that you're not alone and people do get through it.
Yeah. And then you get that support structure, and that is tremendously important when it comes to mental health.
Yes. And so a question about mental health then. Do you come across a lot of new moms who are dealing with postpartum? And what do you do do you have resources or any suggestions? I guess it depends on the severity of their depression, but what's some ways that you can help these women who are dealing with some postpartum depression?
Yeah. The first thing is acknowledging it, right? And not being afraid to say, I'm struggling with how I'm feeling right now, and this is harder than I thought, or am feeling sad or depressed even after I had my baby. There's been such a ingrained social stigma around moms that, or parents, honestly, because it's dads that struggle with some postpartum issues sometimes too, that struggle with their mental health after kids are born because they feel shame that, okay, having a baby is supposed to be the greatest thing in the world, and everyone acts like they should be full of joy when they're not feeling that. And so for a long time, people didn't feel comfortable acknowledging that they were struggling. And so the first step is absolutely taking away that shame factor and saying postpartum depression or depression in general is a medical condition that we don't control. We don't choose to have this issue, but we can get help for it, just like we would get help for any other medical condition. If you had high blood pressure during the pregnancy, you would sought help from your OBGYN and they would have helped you figure out how to bring that blood pressure down. And when it comes to postpartum depression, there are lots of resources. Sometimes it is a matter of connecting to social supports. Sometimes it's therapy, sometimes it's medication, sometimes, it is even more involved than that. It's piece by piece. And the first step is acknowledging. The second step is figuring out what your triggers might be and what help each person might need.
In your practice, have you noticed, like, as throughout the years, are parents more likely to discuss their depression as opposed to maybe years ago when it maybe was your stigma?
I do think people in general are more willing to discuss mental health concerns than they would have been 15, 20 years ago. And I think our society is changing. There are still a lot of cultural and barriers. There are some communities where it's still taboo to talk about mental health, but more and more people are understanding that this is a medical condition that they are not responsible for in terms of choosing to be depressed, and that there are resources available to help.
Right. And I think that it's one of those things that it's hard to talk about, but the more people talk about it, the less of a stigma is attached to it. So I think I'm happy that you're speaking about it right now. You're having this on the radio program, because it's something that you spoke about shame, and it's something that shouldn't be a shameful thing. Like you said, if you have high blood pressure, you deal with it. And it's one of those things that I think is changing with time, and every new generation is more able to express themselves. And even if that's something that used to be something that was shameful, I think it's more out there in the open now. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I think it is important to say there's different levels of exhaustion, frustration that new parents feel. Like we were talking earlier in the conversation about just the tiredness that comes with being a new parent. And sometimes you can be tired, but not depressed. Other times you can actually be tired and depressed, or depressed and not necessarily tired. So teasing some of that stuff out is really important too. And that's where using those support structures is critical.
That's great. What advice would you have for parents who feel overwhelmed? Is there anything besides ECFE? Is there anything that you are always suggest to people, or things that you feel really help people?
Yeah. One thing, of course, is just reaching out to your medical team, whoever that is. The options are, as a new parent, you can reach out to the team that helps take care of your child, but you can also reach out to the team that helps take care of you. And sometimes they're the same people and sometimes they're different people, but you do have those resources, and both groups of healthcare professionals would be capable of helping you get the resources that you need. I think if you are fortunate enough to have community around you, lean into your community. Not everybody has that privilege, but if you do, sometimes I think as new parents, we feel like we have to put on this persona of, oh, I've got it. I can manage everything. I don't need any help, or I don't want to bother. The truth is that a lot of people wouldn't mind coming over and holding your baby for a little while. Those baby cuddles are precious. And if you have a trusted person in your life that is offering to let you have a nap while they hold or watch the baby, go for it. That's perfectly acceptable. And that doesn't make you an incapable parent. That makes you a smart parent for using the resources that you have around. And the other person probably is offering because that's something they want to do. So I always remind parents to lose the idea in their brain that they have to be perfect or they have to be invincible, because it really does take a community. And if you don't have those community members around you, that's where reaching out to those other options like ECFE or mom groups or dad groups can be really helpful.
That's great. Great information. Thanks. This time has flown by. This is just so much great information, and we're just packing it in this 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Last question for you, Dr. Singh. If you could leave with the most important message you want parents to know about supporting their child's health and development in those first 3 years, what would that be?
I think it would be that the first 3 years are super critical for all sorts of growth for your child. So the more that you can lean in to interacting with your child, talking, singing, reading, playing, the better off you and your child will be. Your mental health will actually probably have some benefit from those interactions, and definitely your child will benefit. Do your best during that time. We live in a digital age, and we are often, for instance, scrolling on our phone or on technology. And when you're a new parent, sometimes you have to put that tech away and say, I'm going to actually be all in with my child because that's what they need from me right now. And you're going to see that come back to you in dividends when your child grows and that brain development has really flourished.
Great. Fantastic advice. I'm so grateful that you were able to take the time to come on the show today and share so much important information, and just expertise is really needed.
Thank you for having me, Katie. It's been my pleasure. I think parents just need to be empowered. They have got all the tools that they need within themselves to be awesome parents and to raise amazing kids. And this is what we want as parents, is to help our kids thrive and be wonderful young people and young adults that can contribute to the world. And we can set them up for a great start by investing in our kids in these first 3 years.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh, for joining us on So St. Paul. You can hear a recording of this show at littlemomentscount.org/podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Little Moments Count, you can visit their website at littlemomentscount.org. So St. Paul is a show that's all about the fantastic people, places, and things that happen in our great capital city. And of course, that is St. Paul, Minnesota. I am your host, Katie DeSalle, and I am here every Thursday from 5 to 5:30 p.m., bringing you all kinds of great things about my favorite city. You are listening to WFNU LP 94.1 FM. This is Frogtown Community Radio. Thanks for listening to the Little Moments Count radio podcast in partnership with community radio stations throughout Minnesota. You can find the Little Moments Count radio podcast wherever you get your podcasts and at littlemomentscount.org/podcast.